My little brother Adam caught me in the middle of my private act, but I have to admit that I didn't mind, and I believe he didn't either. It all began on a calm Tuesday evening. The house was serene and quieter than normal. Mom and Dad had gone out for the night, leaving only me and my younger brother Adam. When we were youngsters, he was always the playful one, finding ways to upset me in the most imaginative ways possible. But now we were in a more mutual rhythm. We got along better, and the house felt more serene. I'd returned home from college for fall vacation. I hadn't been back in months, and as soon as I went through the door, a wave of memories hit me. My old room was still mostly intact, though the posters on the walls were faded and the desk was cluttered with items my parents had stored there over the years. It was like walking back in time. I missed the feeling of being at home, surrounded by familiar sights and noises. Adam had changed, and I noticed it as soon as he went into the kitchen to say hello. He wasn't the tiny, awkward child I remembered from a few years before. He'd grown taller, his demeanor more confident. He didn't seem like the same person anymore. It was like seeing a stranger for the first time, but this stranger felt strangely familiar. "What?" he inquired, noticing me staring at him. "Nothing," I replied, hurriedly shaking my head. "You just look different." He smiled and scratched the back of his neck. "It's called growing up, Jennifer. You should try sometime." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help but smile. He had this way of making everything seem lighthearted, as if nothing was ever too serious. Yet there was something more about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. That night, after dinner and several hours of catching up, I retired to my room. The day had been long, with travel, unpacking, and negotiating the emotional burden of returning home after such a long absence. I only wanted a shower and a nice night's sleep. My old bed groaned as I lay down, and the mattress sagged in all the usual spots. The home was still, but for the odd sound of Adam moving around in his room down the hall. I closed my eyes, allowing the familiarity of home to wash over me, but sleep would not come. Instead, my mind roamed. It had been a long time since I'd experienced intimacy. College life was hectic, with more work than socializing. I hadn't spoken with anyone in months, and lying there in the darkness, the reality weighed on me. I shuffled under the covers, my body restless, my thoughts straying in unexpected directions. Depart, and then, without warning, my thoughts turned to Adam. I felt my breath catch. I remembered him standing in the kitchen earlier that night. The way his shirt clung to his chest, the ease with which he smiled, and the warmth of his hug. I dismissed it at the time, but now, in the solitude of my chamber, those memories came flooding back, sharper and more real. What exactly was wrong with me? This was Adam, my younger brother. I shouldn't be thinking about him in this way, but the more I tried to ignore the thoughts, the stronger they grew. My pulse hammered as I recalled how he looked at me when I taunted him, his eyes gleaming with mischief. I imagined his voice as low and playful, whispering my name. He had transformed more than just his appearance. He now had a presence about him that made it impossible to ignore him. As my thoughts continued to spin, I bit my lip and felt my body heat up. My fingers hesitantly slid under the blanket, but I quickly allowed myself to melt into the experience. I closed my eyes, allowing the imagination to take over, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, I felt alive, but it didn't take long. I was entirely immersed in my own universe when the door to my room flung open. Jennifer Adams' voice broke through the silence, and my heart stopped in my chest. He stood in the doorway, his hand still on the doorknob, his gaze wide as he took in the surroundings. My face flushed as I realized how vulnerable I was, my hand still under the cover, and my breathing labored. I scrambled to sit up, wrapping the blanket about myself, as if it would hide what he had just seen. "What the hell, Adam?" I yelled, my voice louder than intended. "Ever heard of knocking?" I had no idea, he stammered. His face became scarlet, and he looked away, scratching the back of his neck awkwardly. "I was just wondering if you wanted to watch a movie or something." "Clearly, I'm busy," I said, my voice trembling with humiliation. Shame, and it's 11 p.m. Adam went to bed, and my heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I can see him muttering, staring at my linens. and his tone was halfway between amused and shocked. He returned my gaze for a brief minute before immediately looking away. Okay, I'll leave you to it. He turned to leave, but before he could close the door, I cried out, "Wait!" I wasn't sure why I said that. Perhaps it was the panic or the strain in the air between us. Whatever it was, the word went out before I could stop it. Adam paused his hand on the doorknob and returned my gaze. His expression was unreadable, and his cheeks remained red. I hesitated, my mind racing for anything to say, some way to salvage the situation, but the truth was that I didn't want him to leave just yet. I apologize. I did not mean to yell. He offered a slight nod, his eyes touching mine briefly before darting away again. It's okay, he murmured, his voice softening. I should have knocked. We stood there quietly, the tension between us thick and oppressive. I could feel my pulse in my ears. My face was still flushed from humiliation, but there was something else going on that I couldn't quite put my finger on. "Do you want to come inside?" I inquired, the words rushing out before I could think them through. Adam raised his eyebrows, evidently astonished by the question. "Seriously?" "Yes," I replied quickly, but my voice faltered. "I mean, you've already arrived." He hesitated for a while before stepping inside and closing the door behind him. He leaned against the wall, his arms crossed across his chest, his gaze wary yet intrigued. So he asked after a moment, "What were you doing in here?" I moaned and pulled the blanket over my head as I felt my face heat up again. "Oh my God, can we not discuss it?" Adam chuckled, his voice low and warm, and for some reason it made my chest clench and ease. "Jennifer, I'm just playing with you." I peeked out from behind the blanket and glared at him. "You were such a jerk." He smiled, his mischievous smirk making my pulse skip a beat. "Yes, but you love me nonetheless." I didn't say anything, but he wasn't wrong. With Adam in the room, the air felt thicker and smaller. He was still reclining comfortably against the wall, arms crossed, and smiling teasingly, making it difficult to breathe. I wasn't sure if he was actually amused or simply attempting to lighten the situation, but it wasn't working. My heart was still hammering from the humiliation of being caught, and I couldn't look him in the eyes for more than a second before wanting to hide under the blanket and disappear. "Jennifer," Adam remarked, his voice lower now. "It's not like I haven't walked in on worse." I gave him a doubtful glance, attempting to regain some control. "What's the worst thing about seeing your sister?" He shrugged, his smirk growing wider. "Oh, I do not know. I once walked in on Dad, clipping his nose hairs shirtless, which left a scar. I couldn't help but laugh. It wasn't a loud laugh, more of a startled chuckle, but it helped to relieve some of the stress." Adam grinned, clearly pleased with himself, and for a moment, things felt normal again, like we were just two siblings hanging out. No awkwardness, no unspoken tension, but the feeling did not last. The silence that followed was heavy, and I could feel his gaze on me, watching me too closely. It made my skin prickle, as if he could see right through me, past the embarrassment and into the thoughts I was desperately trying to ignore. I wrapped the blanket tightly about myself, as if it could protect me from whatever was going on between us, as Adam began his purposefully casual tone. "Who are you thinking about?" My head snapped up, and I focused on him, my face flaming. "No one. I was not." "What type of question is that?" He shrugged again, his face infuriatingly serene. "I'm just suggesting you look into it. It had to have been someone remarkable." It was as if he recognized Adam. I threw a pillow at him, which he caught with ease and laughed. "Could you please stop?" "Okay, Oklahoma." He raised his hands in fake surrender while still chuckling, but his smile faded and his countenance changed, becoming more serious. "I'm only kidding, Jennifer. You don't have to freak out." "Geez," I moaned and ran my hand through my hair. "Okay, maybe don't come into my room unannounced next time." He made a note, and neither of us talked for a moment. The stillness dragged on, and I found myself staring at him, seeing how the faint light from my bedside lamp accentuated the contour of his jaw, and how his hair fell slightly into his eyes. He had always been a good-looking youngster, but now he appeared different, older, and more confident. It seemed strange, like I was seeing him for the first time. "Why are you staring at me that way?" Adam's voice interrupted my thoughts, and I realized too late that I had been staring. I wasn't. I began, but he raised an eyebrow, and cut me short. Yes, you were. I moaned and pulled the blanket over my head again. Simply go away. Adam, nope. Not until you explain what's going on. There's nothing going on, I yelled, my voice muffled by the blanket. But even as I spoke, I knew it wasn't true. There was something going on that I didn't understand, that I couldn't even begin to put into words, and the way he was gazing at me now, as if he could see right through me, wasn't helping. Adam approached, perched on the edge of the bed. I felt the mattress sag with his weight, and my heart skipped. I looked out from under the cover, and he was right there, his face only inches from mine, his expression enigmatic, his eyes searching mine as if he was trying to figure something out. You're acting weird, he replied gently. What is wrong? Nothing, I muttered, but my tone lacked conviction. Jennifer, he urged softly but firmly. Come on, talk to me. A pause, my chest constricting. I didn't know how to express how I felt without seeming mad. How could I tell him that I couldn't stop thinking about him, that he had been on my mind all night, and that even now, sitting so close, he was all I could think about. It's just that I trailed off, swallowing hard. It had been a strange night. Adam tilted his head and studied me. Strange how I couldn't respond. The words wouldn't come. Instead, I turned away, my gaze fixed on the blanket bunched on my lap, hoping he would drop it, but he did not. He remained exactly where he was, waiting, his presence impossible to ignore. Jennifer, he continued again, his voice gentler this time. You can't. Tell me something. His tone smashed through the wall I had been attempting to construct. It wasn't taunting or judgmental. It was sincere, filled with concern, as if he truly cared, which made it even more difficult to keep everything bottled up. I'm not sure what's wrong with me, I stated, my voice barely above a whisper, that I'm thinking about you in ways I shouldn't be. I confessed. The words hung in the air between us, making my stomach twist. I couldn't believe I had spoken it aloud. I braced myself for his reaction, expecting him to back away, laugh it off, or become upset, but he did none of those things. Instead, he remained exactly where he was, his countenance unreadable. What kind of items? He inquired quietly. He seemed unsurprised when I told him this. I hesitated, my throat tight, and thought things I shouldn't have. I repeated, my gaze locked on the blanket. I'm not sure why it simply happened. Adam was silent for quite some time, and I could feel my chest constricting with each passing second. But, much to my amazement, he reached out. His palm rested softly on my arm. The touch was mild, almost timid, yet it still shot a thrill through me. Jennifer, he murmured quietly, his voice steady. It's fine. I looked up at him, my heart racing. It is. He nodded, his hand resting on my arm. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and full of significance. Yeah, it's okay. Adam's voice was steady and calm, but the weight of what he just said made my chest tighten. I wasn't sure if I'd heard him right, if he really meant it, or if he was just trying to ease the awkwardness between us. But the way he looked at me so steady, so sure, it made me think he wasn't just saying it to make me feel better. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, but not uncomfortable. It was like we were both waiting for the other to make the next move, to say something that would break the tension or push things forward. Adam, I started, my voice is shaky. I don't know what's wrong with me. He tilted his head slightly, his gaze never leaving mine. Why do you think something's wrong with you? Because this isn't normal. I said the words tumbling out before I could stop them. You're my little brother. You're my family. I shouldn't stop. He interrupted, his voice firm but gentle. His hand moved from my arm to my shoulders, squeezing lightly. Don't do that. Don't make it sound like you're broken or something. You're not. I blinked, caught off guard by his words, but no, he said, cutting me off again. Jennifer, you're not some kind of freak. You're just feeling something and that's okay. Is it? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper, because it doesn't feel okay. It feels wrong, does it? He countered, his eyes narrowing slightly, because from where I'm sitting it looks like you're beating yourself up over something you can't control, and honestly, I don't think you should. I stared at him, my heart pounding the way he was looking at me, the way he spoke. It was like he wasn't just trying to comfort me. There was something else, there's something deeper. I didn't know what it was, but it made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain. Why aren't you freaking out about this? I asked, my Voice trembling. You should be freaking out. He gave a small shrug, his lips quirking into a faint smile. Maybe I'm just better at keeping my cool than you are, Adam. Jennifer, he said, cutting me off again. Do you trust me? The question took me by surprise. Of course I trust you. Then trust me when I say this doesn't have to be a big deal, he said softly. It's just us. No one else has to know. No one else has to understand. It's just you and me. His words sent a shiver through me, and I felt my chest tighten. The way he said it so calm and sure made it sound so simple, but it wasn't simple. It was complicated and messy and terrifying. And yet the way he was looking at me, the way his hand rested on my shoulder, made it feel like maybe it didn't have to be Adam, I said, my voice barely audible. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't care if it's normal or not, he replied, his voice steady. I care about you. And if this is something you're feeling, then maybe I feel it too. My breath caught in my throat, and I stared at him, my mind racing. Did he really mean that? Was he really saying what I thought he was saying? I didn't know how to respond, didn't know what to do. All I knew was that my heart was pounding so loudly, I could barely hear anything else. Before I could stop myself, I reached out my hand, brushing against his. He didn't pull away. Instead, his fingers curled around mine, his touch warm and steady. The simple gesture sent a wave of relief and something deeper, something I didn't want to name, washing over me. I don't know what to do. I admitted, my voice trembling. I don't even know what this is. Me neither, he said, his voice soft, but maybe we don't have to know. Maybe we just figure it out together. His words made my chest ache, and I felt my eyes sting. I didn't know why I was so emotional, why his words hit me so hard, but they did. I nodded slowly, squeezing his hand. For a moment, neither of us moved. We just sat there, our hands clasped, the silence between us filled with unspoken understanding. It was like the world had faded away, leaving just the two of us caught in this moment that felt both impossible and inevitable. And then before I could overthink it, I leaned in. The kiss was soft, hesitant, like we were both testing the waters. His lips were warm, and I could feel the faint tremor in his hand as he held mine. It wasn't perfect. There was a clumsiness to it, a nervousness that came from the uncertainty of what we were doing, but it was real. It was us. When we pulled back, his eyes met mine, and I saw the same mix of emotions. I was feeling fear, hope, and something that felt a lot like relief. Neither of us said anything, but we didn't need to. In that moment, everything we couldn't put into words was written in the way we looked at each other. Adam gave me a small smile, his hand still holding mine. It was not so scary. I laughed softly, the sound shaky but genuine. Speak for yourself, he grinned, and for the first time all night, I felt like maybe, just maybe, things are going to be okay. The room felt electric after that kiss, like the air between us had changed in some irreversible way. My heart was still racing, my mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. Adam was quiet, his gaze steady as he watched me, and for the first time in a long time, I couldn't read him. He wasn't laughing, teasing, or brushing it off. He was just there, present in a way that made my chest ache. Did that feel wrong to you? He asked softly, breaking the silence. I shook my head, my voice caught in my throat. No, he whispered. It didn't. Good, he said, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips, because it didn't feel wrong to me either. I exhaled shakily, the weight of his words settling over me. I'd spent so much time convincing myself that these feelings were unnatural, something to be ashamed of, but hearing him say that, hearing him validate what I was feeling, made it all seem a little less terrifying. What happens now? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Adam shrugged, his smile fading into something softer, more vulnerable. I don't know. No, I've never done this before, Jennifer, but I think we just take it one step at a time and figure it out as we go. His words were simple, but they carried so much weight. I nodded slowly, my fingers remaining linked with his. Okay. The silence stretched between us again, but it wasn't heavy this time. It felt reassuring, as if we were finally on the same page, letting go of all the unspoken tension that had built up for so long. For the first time, I felt able to breathe. Would you like to talk about it? Adam inquired after a minute, his tone wary. Talk about what? About why you've been acting strangely lately. he said, his lips quirking into a faint smile. Because let's be honest, Jennifer, you've been in weird. I groaned, pulling my hand away from his to cover my face. I don't know, I admitted, my voice muffled. It's just everything about you feels different now, and it's messing with my head. Different how? He asked, leaning in slightly. I hesitated, my cheeks burning. You're not the same annoying kid I grew up with. I said, finally. You're confident, grown up, and I don't know how to handle that. Adam's smile widened, a hint of mischief returning to his expression. So, what you're saying is you think I'm hot. Oh my God, stop. I groaned, throwing a pillow at him. He caught it easily, laughing, and the sound made my chest tighten in a way that was both comforting and infuriating. He slowly leaned into me and kissed me again for a short moment. I'm just saying, he teased, tossing the pillow back onto the bed. You could have just said that instead of making it all dramatic. Yeah, well, I'm not exactly thrilled about it, I muttered, though my lips twitched into a reluctant smile. I felt like we were playing around with each other, while also teasing. Adam's laughter faded, and his expression softened. You don't have to be ashamed, Jennifer, he said quietly. It's just us. No one else has to know, he said while joining my sheets the way he said. It was so calm and sure made my chest ache. I nodded, my throat tight. Yes, I said softly, just us, but while I said it, he now lay next to me, and he had seen everything. Without saying a word, he moved his fingers towards the spot, and continued with where I was left at. It was amazing. I had never felt something like this before. While he was busy, I lost control and asked him to go even further, and so he did. I'm not going to jump into details, but let's just say it was one of the craziest nights of my life. When he was done, and we both lay down, I could feel that we both realized what had just happened. In some way it felt wrong, but in another way it felt like the best thing I have ever felt. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Something had shifted between us. The tension was still there, but it wasn't as heavy. It was like we'd taken the first step into something new, something uncertain, and now we were just trying to figure out how to navigate it. Adam stayed in my room for a while, sitting on the edge of the bed as we talked about everything and nothing. It felt like old times, back when we were kids and used to stay up late whispering secrets to each other in the dark, but now there was an undercurrent of something else, something deeper, something neither of us fully understood. When he finally left to go to his own room, I felt both relieved and strangely empty. I lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts of him. The way he'd kissed me, the way his hand had felt in mine, the way he'd looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered. It was all so overwhelming, but it was also impossible to ignore that the next morning I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. For a moment I thought it was our parents, but then I remembered they were out for the weekend. It was just me and Adam. I got out of bed and headed downstairs, my heart racing at the thought of seeing him again. I wasn't sure what I was expecting. Awkwardness, maybe, or tension. But when I walked into the kitchen and saw him sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal, he looked completely normal. Too normal. Morning, he said, flashing me a grin. Sleep well? Yeah, I said, grabbing a mug and pouring myself some coffee. You like a baby, he said, his tone lied, but when I sat down across from him, I caught the way his eyes lingered on me, just a little too long, the way his smile softened slightly. It made my chest tighten all over again. We ate breakfast in relative silence, the occasional clink of spoons against bowls filling the air. I could feel him watching me, though, and it made it hard to focus on anything else. My mind kept replaying the events of the night before. The kiss, the way he'd said, just us, Jennifer, he said, suddenly breaking the silence. I looked up, my heart skipping a beat at the seriousness in his tone. Are you okay? Yeah, I said quickly, though my voice wavered. Why wouldn't I be? He tilted his head, studying me, because last night was a lot, and I just want to make sure you're not freaking out. Are you fine? I said, though my cheeks burned really. He nodded, but I could tell he wasn't convinced. If you say so. The remainder of the day went smoothly, but the tension between us remained seething just beneath the surface. Every glance, every inadvertent touch of hands felt electric, as if we were both waiting for something to happen. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it was coming, and when it arrived, I wasn't prepared. As the day progressed, the air between us became heavier, with every small encounter fraught with unsaid anxiety. I could feel it every time Adam looked at me or spoke. Even when we were sitting calmly in the same room, it was as if a storm was brewing on the horizon, and I knew it was only a matter of time before it burst. That evening, the home was quiet. Again, our parents had called to say they'd be staying at Grandma's for another night, leaving me and Adam alone. He had gone up to his room after supper, leaving me to sit on the couch with the TV on quietly in the background. I tried to concentrate on the TV, but my mind kept wandering, revisiting the events of the night before. The way he kissed me, the way he looked at me afterwards as if I weren't simply his sister, but something more. It was simultaneously horrifying and exhilarating. I was so deep in contemplation that I didn't hear him come back downstairs. When he sat down beside me, I jerked slightly, surprised by his unexpected presence. Sorry, he admitted, his lips quirking into a little smile. I didn't mean to scare you. It's all right, I said quickly, even though my heart was racing. For a time, we just sat there, the TV casting a faint glow over the room. Adam said nothing, and neither did I, but the tension between us was evident. I could feel him observing me from the corner of his eye, which made my skin prickle. Jennifer, he murmured abruptly, breaking the silence. Can we speak? I turned to face him, my chest clenching at the severity of his tone. What about us? He asked, his gaze fixed on last night. My stomach flipped. I wasn't sure I was prepared for this conversation, but I nodded anyhow. Okay. He paused and ran a hand through his hair. I've been thinking about it all day, he said, about what occurred and what it means. I inquired, my voice barely above a whisper, and I believe he trailed off, his cheeks blushing slightly. I don't think I want to pretend that didn't happen. His comments jolted me. My heart pounded as I glanced at him. You do not. He shook his head, his gaze catching mine. No, Jennifer, because it didn't feel incorrect. It felt right the way he said it, which made my chest ache. I opened my lips to answer, but no words emerged. I had no idea what to say or how to express everything I was feeling. All I knew was that he was staring at me as if I were the only thing that mattered, which made me want to cry. I am afraid. I eventually revealed to Adam, my voice wavering. This is all very new to me, and I'm not sure what to do. You don't need to know, he murmured softly. We'll work this out together. He reached out his hand to brush against mine, and the simple touch sent shivers down my spine. I looked down at our hands and then up at him. My throat tightened, and I whispered, Are you sure about this? My voice was hardly audible. I've never felt more certain about anything, he replied, his voice steady. I care about you, Jennifer, more than I probably should, but I'm done trying to ignore it. His words hit me like a wave, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in, closing the distance between us. The kiss was soft at first, hesitant, but it quickly deepened as all the emotions I'd been holding back came rushing to the surface. His hands moved to my shoulders, pulling me closer, and I felt my heart swell with something I couldn't name. When we finally pulled back, as we lay side by side on the couch, the TV still playing softly in the background, I understood something. What we had was not normal. It was not something anybody else could comprehend, but it was ours, and that was enough for the time being. That was enough. I realize my tale may sound strange to some people, but I'm glad I can share it in some way. I feel horrible about what I did. Should I share my thoughts on it in the comments?